As President Biden kicks off the climate summit with world leaders today at the White House, virtually, that is, the country's largest coal miners union has agreed to endorse the president's plan to transition away from fossil fuels. In return, the miners are supposed to get guaranteed jobs in renewable energy development. In a snowy Charleston, West Virginia, Grady Trimble's on the ground for reaction. Grady, what are they saying?
Hey, Bill, well, these miners are not part of that union, so they're a little more skeptical of that plan. And as you said, they work in all sorts of conditions here in the mines of West Virginia, including snow in April. Roy Quillen has been doing this for 55 years. You've seen it all. What do you think the future holds under the Biden administration?
As of right now, it doesn't look all that bright. I'm hoping that the future will be better than what they're telling us right now. But it doesn't look that good right now.
Of course, a big part of this infrastructure bill that he's proposed includes green jobs. The union says they'll fight to get displaced miners into those jobs. How sure are you that that would actually happen?
Not very. And reason being, from what I've seen of these green jobs, there's not going to be enough of them to support the people that's going to lose their jobs in the coal industry.
And if you look at the numbers, under the first 3 years of President Trump, mining jobs actually increased. Then the pandemic hit, supply or demand for energy fell quite a bit, and so did the mining jobs. But how do you feel about an ability to bring those jobs back? What worked then?
Well, it worked then because Trump was behind the coal industry and trying to bring a culture around of bringing it back to where people could live off of it. You know what I mean? Have work to do with it.
And of course, the Biden administration, they say that this green push will create millions of jobs and will be better for the climate. But of course, Bill, as you heard here, some skepticism from those who are actually in this industry.
More solar panels. Thank you, Grady. Grady Trimble in the snow of Charleston. Thank you, sir.
Yesterday's verdict in the state criminal trial does not address potentially systemic policing issues in Minneapolis. The Justice Department has opened a civil investigation to determine whether the Minneapolis Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of unconstitutional or unlawful policing.
Attorney General Merrick Garland on the DOJ's response to policing problems in Minneapolis. In the same statement, he said the department will return to more active use of consent decrees, that's court-ordered plans, for reforming city police departments. Critics say these agreements can cause more problems for some cities. The AP wrote this headline about Ferguson, Missouri, after an Obama-era consent agreement, quote, "Money woes could lead to dissolution. So is this the right path forward?" John Daukus is a former acting U.S. Attorney General for civil rights. He joins me now. So I don't think there's anyone better to talk to, John. Tell me, when is it good to use a consent decree situation like this where the federal government comes in? And when does it get to be too much?
Well, Dana, the issue is that these consent decrees and pattern and practice investigations need to be used very judiciously and carefully. In the Obama era, DOJ issued 24 consent decrees, entered into 24 consent decrees concerning police departments. And a way to look at this is, how did that work out? It didn't work out very well. It wasn't a panacea. It didn't cause all the cure the problems that we have now. What the Trump DOJ was trying to do was engage in a more collaborative process with police departments to improve what was going on and the excessive force that we saw and the other problems that we've seen. So this seems to me to be doubling down on failure and not moving forward with a different approach that could provide better results.
Well, one thing they said that is different this time. So when Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General and he said, we're not going to do this anymore in this way, one of the things was the problem of who gets to approve it, right? That you usually had to have that top Justice Department officials, but now the prosecutors are going to be able to do that. Is that a better way to do this, or does that lead to, again, just more resentment and possibly the money woes and people being basically stopped in their tracks of doing policing?
Dana, the problem with these consent decrees in some cases is that you have an unelected federal judge who ends up running a local school district, a local prison, a local police department, sometimes for decades. We've had consent decrees in place for 50 years. So they're very powerful, and they should only be approved at the highest levels of the Justice Department. And that's what Attorney General Sessions required. And he also said that in the main, they should be limited to 3 years. So we don't have these consent decrees going on for decades as they have in the past.
All right. Well, John, I'm sure that Minneapolis understands why this is happening, and we'll certainly stay on top of it and see what their reaction is. Thanks for being here with your expertise.
Thanks for seeing you again, David.
We were in the air yesterday when Merrick Garland made the announcement, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and James Trusty came on. And I spelled it out very clearly what happens. You were in the Bush administration when some of this was happening. The Obama administration continued it. The Trump team got away from it, and now Biden's going back in.
They're going back. And in a different way to what one of the differences is, instead of having top Justice Department officials deal with it, now it will just basically be dispersed. And I think that there will be a lot of resentment. I'm not saying that the police departments don't need some reform, but there might be some resentment.
I'm assuming it's going to be a year or two before we get the findings. Would you agree on that?
No, at least, because they have to go. They go through every email. They go through every text messages. I mean, it's a lot.
At this hour, floor of the House getting ready. 500,000 jobs. Good sign of recovery. Larry Kudlow argues that President Biden's spending plan will run a booming U.S. economy straight into a ditch. Larry's here now, host of Kudlow, Fox Business 4 Eastern. How you doing, my friend? Good day to you. Make your case. What do you think they'll do, Larry? And what do you think of the effect will that be? Why don't we start there?
Well, look, you've got a booming economy. You've got booming vaccinations. Businesses are reopening. All this stuff, by the way, started during the prior administration. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my point. You could run 8, 10% growth this year, maybe 12% in one quarter. Who knows? It's a boom. The stock market is a boom. People going back to work, retail sales, consumer spending, all that. So now Biden world wants this so-called infrastructure plan, and it's really not about infrastructure, only about 20% or so. It's about the Green New Deal, and it's about a huge expansion of the federal welfare state. All right? This is, great society to the 10th power stuff. And to pay for that expansion, they want to raise taxes on businesses, large and small, which will reduce investment, reduce employment, and reduce real wages. So it's the primacy of the federal government. It's the demise of the private sector free enterprise system. It doesn't make any sense.
But it appears that they're going to go forward with this. They got the votes to do it, right, under reconciliation? You would agree on that? In the meantime, you've been saying for a year the stimulus is the vaccine. And there is a stimulus in this economy right now. So if they make the move as they have talked about it on paper, what's the effect of that?
Well, look, I think the votes are going to be close in the Senate. They may be close in the House, too. There's a lot of strings that could unravel here. But, I think 51-vote reconciliation. I don't think there's going to be any bipartisanship. The Republican infrastructure plan is being rejected by the Democrats, even though, I might add, that same plan passed unanimously, bipartisan, last year in the Environment and Public Works Committee of the Senate. So now Team Biden wants to throw that out, and so will the rest of the Democrats, I guess. Maybe Manchin, maybe Sinema, I can't tell that. All I'm saying is, though, we are taxing and regulating heavily. I mean, they're going to go after fossil fuels. The so-called climate summit, which is today and tomorrow, is going to set strict limits on carbon emissions. Within 10 years, basically going to blow up the fossil fuel sector. This is going to cost a lot of jobs, just as the business tax hikes are going to cost a lot of jobs, just as the capital gains tax hike is going to cost a lot of jobs, because it's all going to damage investment. So my point is, this stuff will throw a wet blanket over what could be a many multi-year economic boom. We still have low taxes, Bill. We still have low regulations from the Trump era. Why change it? It's working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Saw the piece Rob Portman wrote in the Wall Street Journal. Check it out yesterday as well. I think he put it at 600 or 700 billion Republicans are willing to go. That means, if that's on the table, they're willing to go as high as $1 trillion. But Democrats are well above the $2 trillion mark. See you at 4 o'clock Eastern, Larry. Nice to see you today.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks.
America's federal government should be of the people, by the people, and for the people. But with H.R. 51, America's government will become of the Democrats, by the Democrats, and for the Democrats.
A warning from Republicans as the House gets ready to vote on a bill to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino.
Bill Hemmer, you still feel upside down?
I'm a little better now.
One of those days.
You and Carl are upside down, though.
We'll get you. So Democrats now have the votes to pass the bill in the House. It faces an uphill fight, though, in the Senate. Democrats pushing forward for the second time in a year now, hoping to change the political landscape. Take you to the floor right now. Check it out.
It is in our platform as a Democratic Party to treat the citizens of the District of Columbia as equal citizens of the United States of America.
It is imperative that we correct this injustice, which is also a matter of civil rights and security.
Full coverage here on Fox. Ari Fleischer will look at the political issues. Chad Pergam on the congressional calculus in today's vote. Chad, let's begin with you, live from the Hill. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Well, the House of Representatives is now debating the bill. A final vote is expected around midday. The District of Columbia is required in the Constitution to serve as the seat of American government. Republicans want to keep it that way.
In Federalist number 43, James Madison argued that if the capital city were situated within a state, the federal government would be subject to undue influence by the host state.
The bill would actually shrink the size of D.C. It would morph the rest of the city into Washington Douglas Commonwealth. It would be named after Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist who was buried in the city. Now, regardless, the bill will likely die in the Senate because it needs 60 votes to clear a filibuster. But some Democrats think they can overcome that hurdle.
We don't do any filibusters for anything now except legislation, so it's on its last legs. So with the movement of the filibuster, there will be movement for D.C. statehood.
This bill is a chess piece in a larger political game played by Democrats. If the bill stalls, Democrats will use this bill to gin up support to modify the filibuster. Bill?
Thank you, Chad. More coming up in a moment here. Thank you.
Joining us for more on this, Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary and Fox News contributor. Ari, I was just thinking, when you and I were staffers on Capitol Hill in the mid-'90s, I mean, this was an issue. But now it's actually got White House backing. It's going to get a vote today. It's going to pass in the House. And they're really eyeing that filibuster, which might hold now. But could this be coming?
I don't think it'll be coming because I think the Senate will block it, as they should. It's a power grab. But two points here, Dana. One, as you point out, I lived in D.C. on Capitol Hill, 6 blocks from the Dome for some 20 years. The solution, if you want a solution, I could have been a Marylander.
Yep.
It would have been so easy just to take the area I live, call it Maryland, and then I have taxation and representation and people in Congress serving me. Easy solution for everybody in the district. They won't do it, Dana, because what's really going on here, it's a power grab. The same principle that motivates the Democrats to potentially pack the Supreme Court, pack the Senate, and pack the country when you let people come in illegally by the millions and give them a pathway to citizenship. It's all a power grab by one party.
All right, we're going to watch this play out. Chad says we'll get a vote around noontime, and we'll see what happens then. I want to shift your focus to a little bit of the coverage that we've been watching out of Columbus, Ohio. And, I mean, there's a fog in here initially in the early stages with a lot of, frankly, bad reporting. But it apparently did not stop there. I've got 2 examples I want to share with you and our viewers right now. The first one is call for number 5, guys. This NBC News apparently edited the 911 call. And the reason why this is so important is because you're in a frantic moment, and there are a lot of words exchanged. And the police are approaching a scene that they're trying to understand. So every word has value to them. They edited it. Here is the unedited portion that you did not hear on that broadcast.
Grown girls over here trying to fight us, trying to stab us, trying to put her hands on our grandma. Get here now.
Have you seen any weapons? Ma'am, do you see any weapons?
We need a police officer here now.
If these grown girls over here trying to fight us, trying to stab us, get here now. There was another thing from the New York Times. They edited a Ben Crump tweet, the lawyer for George Floyd and many others. Here is the original tweet, screen left. As he breathed a collective sigh of relief today, a community in Columbus felt the sting of another police shooting. As a killed, unarmed 15-year-old black girl named Akia Bryant, another child lost, another hashtag, raised fist, folded hands. On the right side now, you see where the New York Times wrote it up this way. As we breathed a collective sigh of relief today, a community in Columbus felt the sting of another police shooting, another child lost, another hashtag. The point is that the edit of the Crump tweet claimed the 16-year-old was unarmed. And now we know, I mean, based on the body cam video there, that there was a knife in her right hand. I know you've been looking for a couple years now, going back, I think it's 24 months, trying to put together this book on how the media has now gone all in against, in the example you're using, President Trump. And going back to your time at the White House, how you did not see it that clearly back in 2004, I would argue, 2005. How do you interpret what would be seen as such an egregious act by NBC and the New York Times to unfairly represent this sensitive moment in Southeast Columbus? Go ahead.
Race, but the media stirs a racial pot in the worst way in this country, as if we're supposed to pit one American against another. No, we're supposed to be grateful for the police of all colors when they defend any of us, regardless of our color. And that's what happened in Columbus. Ari,
you're also very engaged with a lot of athletes and sports leagues when it comes to communications and dealing with crises, things like that. So LeBron James, this tweet he is now taken down. But basically, it showed the photograph of the officer involved in the shooting, and he said, "You're next," hashtag accountability. Now, he took it down because he said that was out of context, or, you know, what is going on?
Like a lot of people, I think he tweeted in anger without reflection, and he shouldn't have done it. He took it down. But what was terrible about his tweet, one, the facts. Again, shouldn't he be grateful that the police saved a life? And two, his tweet suggested that there should be violence against the officer. That's what "you're next" could imply to a lot of crazy people out there. And so it was a bad idea, terrible, but it's all part of how the pot gets stirred so easily along racial lines, instead of recognizing that the police protect us. And they don't do it with an eye toward race. If that person with a knife was white, they'd have been shot by the officer too. I'm certain of it. It didn't matter what the race was. A life was in jeopardy, and the police acted to protect a life. I don't think that's hard to see for anybody in society, but the press stirs that pot. LeBron probably fell for the press stirring the pot. I'm glad he took it down, but shame on LeBron for putting it up in the first place.
All right, Ari Fleischer, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ari.
Thank you, guys.
And be sure to catch up.
Be clear about this because it's important. What Crump tweeted is that there was a 15-year-old unarmed girl.
Right.
We now know she's 16 and she was armed with a knife in her hand. What the Times did is they took out the word unarmed to, quote, make the tweet more accurate, and after initially telling readers what they had done. So just want to make sure that we're on the record and we're very clear about this. The accuracy about these events is of paramount importance for Americans who are trying to understand it in their own
For justice and also for immediate aftermath.
Yeah, so there's that. 10 minutes past now. Here we go. Fox News.
I got to say one thing, Bill.
Yeah.
It's a great thing that Kamala Harris, the vice president, will have a ceremonial Zoom call today with Guatemala. I mean, that is really going to help.
Let's keep it virtual.
You know where those fentanyl pills are made?
Yep.
China. And if you're worried about overdoses and opiates in your country for your kids, pay attention to this.
Coming across the border by the ton. Okay, now the parent of a high school student saying that enough is enough, drawing the line against a progressive ideology taught at her son's high school, large high school too. Asra Nomani wrote a piece in the Federalist. It's called Indoctrination. #1 U.S. high school pushes racist activism on students, talks about how the school put the teaching plan in place without the parents getting notice, and how the principal played a major role despite denying any involvement. Asra Nomani is with me now. Good morning to you, and thank you for your time. Very interesting piece. You make so many points in here. What were they teaching that gave the parents about that much time notice before it happened?
We got zero notice. I literally started getting disturbing text messages on the Friday of this one teaching. And what we were learning was that the kids were being taught that they were racist, that they needed to get active with Black Lives Matter, and that they shouldn't salsa dance because it was cultural appropriation. And so, mind you, this is at a high school where 80% of the students are students of color. 70% of them are Asian, just like my son. And so what we have is an indoctrination happening in our public school system with no parent notification.
Well, you make the point, and our guest last hour made the point, the parents have the power to change this. So
Exactly.
I mean, yourself and others, you could do that. But if you don't get a heads up as to how you can tell your own child to make a different decision in that classroom, what can you do?
Well, what you can do is you can investigate. You have to ask the questions. You know, I became an accidental activist, and now I'm helping with an organization called Parents Defending Education, because we're here to help expose all of these incidents. There are two regulations that we discovered that the principal violated. One is a regulation in our school system about controversial issues. You can't have controversial issues like the issue of race in America today without diverse opinions. And the second one is you can't just show videos that are rated mature audience, as was a documentary shown during this teaching. And so what we have is this tragedy in which parents are being left out. But what we can answer with is vigilance. We can all be vigilant.
Just want to read a paragraph from your piece, okay, in the Federalist. You write, over the past school year, we faced a superintendent, school board, and principal leading a crusade to racially alter the school's demographics, with the school district abandoning the school's merit-based, race-blind test in December to gerrymander the admissions process so fewer Asians and more Black and Hispanic students would make the cut to attend the advanced math and science school. So you were born in India, right?
Yes.
So they're teaching Asians that they do not experience America the same way in which an African American or an Hispanic student would experience America. How do we understand that?
Yeah, this is the tragedy of this ideology called critical race theory. We need to appropriately challenge any kind of racism and discrimination that exists in our country. We all agree on that. But what has happened is this ideology is creating a new hierarchy of human value. And Asians are now being bucketed as white adjacent. And so we are an inconvenient minority for the narrative of the critical race theory victim Olympics. And that's what they then bring into the classroom. So, for example, this is just one little coloring book that's being put out by something called Black Lives Matter at schools, where they are putting this ideology into our kids' minds so that they can create activists, not thinkers, but activists. And that's a really dangerous, slippery slope in which we are ultimately not caring about the welfare of the children. Like, that's ultimately why we have to fight back, is because this is not about taking care of our children, but this is about turning them into activists.
Now, you wonder what the effect of that is on a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. You're very thoughtful. Thanks for coming on today. Asra Nomani.
Live in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, with more for us. Hi, Griff.
Hi, Dana. A lot of unanswered questions, and the Pasquotank County Sheriff's Office has turned things over to the State Bureau of Investigation. But let me show you what we know talking to witnesses and friends of the family who were out here. You can see Andrew Brown Jr.'s home here. They say here that the sheriff's deputies came to issue a warrant, and the splatter on the wall is because Brown got in his vehicle and tried to flee, driving. You can see the tire marks here in the grass, driving this direction and ending crashing across the street. Now, witnesses told us that there was as many as 8 shots, and the gentleman that lives in that White House, you can see a bullet hole. Actually, if you're close up, the bullet hole that went into his home. Now, we can share exclusively a photo of Brown's car. The BMW here crashed into that tree. That's where he ended up. There's a blood stain from his body on the sidewalk. That's why the blue tint is in that photo. But as you mentioned, that caused the local folks here to take to the streets. Some 200 protesters blocking intersections, demanding that Sheriff Tommy Wooten give them more answers than just a short press conference they had. And the NAACP president here, Keith Rivers, had this to say.
Griff, we're going to move to this.
I don't want to cross her religious ceremony, but see if she... There we go. That's a blessing in some place, I'm sure. So the bottom line is, there's a movement to change America as we know it by the most partisan people in this town, and that's saying a lot. That includes fundamentally changing the makeup of the court, which would set in motion the end of the rule of law as we know it. Because if the Democrats did it and Republicans got back in charge, we'd be forced to change the number. The court would become a political football, destroying its independence, and the American people would lose faith in the institution. By increasing the number of United States senators, making D.C. a state, is the biggest assault on the Senate in my lifetime, and comes at the expense of Texas and South Carolina and every other state. A horribly bad idea. H.R. 1 is nationalizing how we vote. It's a federal takeover of our election. And there's an open discussion in the United States Senate, led by the majority leader, about changing the rules of the Senate to make all this a reality. Steny Hoyer, a friend of mine, says that the filibuster needs to go so this agenda can go through the Senate. I want the American people to know what the filibuster means to you. It's a tool we have as Republicans to make sure that extreme ideas like turning the Supreme Court from 9 to 13 can't happen without Republican buy-in. It's a check and balance on the desire to federalize the elections through H.R. 1. It's the end of making D.C. a state unless you can get some Republicans to agree that's a good idea. If you're wanting to understand why all this matters, Senator Cruz wrote a book called One Vote Away: How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. He will tell you better than I what this book is about. But if you're a gun owner, the Heller decision was 5-4, interpreting the Constitution in such a fashion as that you, as an American citizen have an individual right to own a gun. That the constitutional provisions about guns apply not to militias, but to individuals. So the Republican Party in the Senate is the last line of defense against this radical agenda. And I want to thank Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema for rejecting the idea of changing the filibuster. I'm asking no more of them than I ask of myself. So I appreciate what they're doing for the Senate and for the country. But conservatives care about the court. Our goal is to make sure that people on the court do not become legislators in a robe. Their goal is to add to the court judges who will do our job, creating laws, not interpreting laws. This is the biggest fight for the rule of law, maybe since Marbury versus Madison. With that, somebody who I respect immensely when it comes to legal ability, who's worked in this building and can tell you better than I can how a single vote can change America in the Supreme Court. Senator Cruz.
So they have Ted Cruz taking the microphone now, Lindsey Graham doing the setup there. They're talking about court packing. That's happening in the Senate. Well, on the same day, Dana, in the House, they're going to vote and pass this resolution. Well, they'll pass it in the House anyway. Yeah. That would make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. So both is happening right now on both sides of Congress.
They're hanging a lot of their policies on, the Democrats are, on this idea that you could actually get enough momentum going for all these things that the left wants in order to break the filibuster. So far, that's holding, and I think that it will hold, but there's certainly a lot of pressure against the dam.
Mm-hmm.
Was that deep thought for you?
We'll see where it goes. I mean, could it get a noon vote in the House, right? And with regard to court packing, you're going to have to get a concession by some of these moderate senators to get it done.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's Joe Manchin, that's Kristen Sinema, that's Senator Kelly from
people
Arizona
forget
as well.
about, I was just going to say, people forget about Senator Mark Kelly. They keep him quiet. That guy has as big of problems as any of the other moderate
So every
Democrats.
day we come out here, right?
Yeah.
You know, I keep my little notes here, right? This is what Kristen Sinema said in January.
Oh, he's really keeping tabs.
What she said was that retaining the legislative filibuster is not meant to impede the things we want to get done. It's meant to protect what the Senate is designed to be. Also in January, a spokesperson for the same senator reiterated that. So I'm just hanging on to it, see whether or not those words matter in the end.
And then if she does, will you be surprised and taken aback like you were earlier?
Yes, I shall.
I'm not going to forget it. We're going to move on to this. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo keeping the press out of press events as he faces several scandals. What he did to one reporter that was just
issue here yet again. Here we are. LeBron shot up another tweet after that came down. It reads, "I'm so damn tired of seeing black people killed by police. I took the tweet down because it's being used to create more hate. This isn't about one officer. It's about the entire system, and they always use our words to create more racism. I am so desperate for more accountability," in all caps. LeBron is from Ohio, point that out. Senator Tom Cotton fired off this one. LeBron James is inciting violence against an Ohio police officer. This is disgraceful and dangerous. Is the NBA okay with this? Is Twitter and tweet? Geraldo, I'll begin with you.
You know, Bill, I think that LeBron James, King James, is an example of if you have great influence, it should also carry great responsibility. He should have kept his mouth shut until the facts were revealed. As it was, the video clearly shows the cop doing what the only thing the cop could have done to spare the life of another child. The video clearly shows the 16-year-old, the victim of the police shooting, to be in the process of knifing another child to death. You know, there is, another Ohio killing of a teenager this week, not being talked about as much, that is, I think, revelatory when it comes to the situation in Columbus. In your hometown, Bill, in Cincinnati, Ohio, on Monday night, a 13-year-old girl, a black child, killed another 13-year-old, knifed her to death. They were schoolmates. That shows the environment in which the cops often act. It is fraught with violence, fraught with peril. You don't know what's going on, and I think that is a reality. But LeBron James, with the responsibility he has, should have kept his mouth shut. And
black crime. What about when black police officers are killed? What about David Dorn? Talk about the other black people who are being killed. Stop attacking police officers.
I get it. When you think about Chicago and how many years we've been covering that, thinking about the crime, gentlemen, in major American cities, L.A. and New York, just look at what's happened here. This heartbeat of America, one could argue. I mean, it's still a ghost town because of COVID, but you've got all these vagrants now who are living here, and the mayor's right now going to send 80 uniformed officers and supervisors in through the area to try and clear things out over the next 2 weeks. They've got a similar deal on Skid Row in L.A. Geraldo, if you don't clean up this problem, these cities don't come back.
I agree, Bill, and I am heartened. I happen to be in Los Angeles right now, that a federal judge has just ordered the city of Los Angeles to find housing for all these homeless, these vagrants, the Skid Rows of this, the second largest city in the country, long past due. But going back to the environment we're talking about, first of all, I reject the statistics of those who are supporting the police. 1,000 were killed by police last year, or in 1 year, and they were per capita, they were 2 times as many blacks killed than whites. Of course, black people live in a much more violent environment than whites do, and we have to recognize that reality. But the anguish from the George Floyd murder, you can call it a murder now the jury has ruled, is, I think, reflective of a reality that cannot be ignored. I get that cops have a tough job. I get that this is a society that is now racially divided and that poverty pimps and others are dividing us along racial lines, and that cops have a tough job. But if we are not sensitive to the fear that black families, particularly minority families more generally, have of their kids going out at night and being hurt by cops, we deny another reality. We have to understand that cops have their reality, the community has theirs.
Just that
yes, there's violence.
Right.
We don't want the police contributing to it.
We've been watching this thing in Chicago. It's just crickets every time. Leo, quickly, got to go.
Very quickly, you see what Geraldo did? Typical game. You conflate the George Floyd case, and every case is a George Floyd case. That's a lie. Every case has to be looked at individually. And all those cities you named, Bill, they're Democratic cities that are apologists to the extreme that allow them to loot and rob. Every one of those cities that's having a crime wave, Democratic cities, everyone knows why. Appeasement.
Gentlemen, thank you. Geraldo and Leo are now in the same city, Los Angeles.
Look out.
I smell a peace pipe. Thank you, fellas. See you soon.